Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Miller. I'm with School of PE. It's 7 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll go ahead and get started here in just a minute or two. First, I want to thank everyone for taking some time out here on a Tuesday night to attend this webinar. Hopefully, everyone had a good holiday weekend and a good start to your work week. Are you guys able to hear me? If so, if you could just kind of throw a Y in the chat window, that'd be fantastic. But again, thanks for coming out. I'm going to go ahead. Oh, thank you both for saying that. Let me just admit somebody else in. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right. So tonight's topic I thought would be kind of an informative topic, but also kind of one that's kind of fun as well. What edge does passing the FE and the PE give you? Also, what kind of opportunities are unlocked through licensure? I think a lot of times, if you're not already on the journey of preparing for either your FE and your PE, it's not something that you really think about because you don't maybe have it in your career path or your vision at that time. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to walk through it. So who is this for? Well, all of you have passed the P or the FE, so engineering students, EITs, anyone that's early in their career that hasn't maybe decided whether they want to either take the FE or the PE exam. And hopefully a couple of things that you'll learn through tonight's webinar is, the FE versus the PE, which I'll just cover shortly. You guys are, you already know what the FE and the PE is. And then just talk about some of the career and salary impacts along with some long-term value. And anyone in here, please feel free to, share any experiences. You can either unmute yourself or throw it in the chat window. So again, FE, fundamentals of engineering, and then obviously PE is for professional engineer. We'll talk about some of the things that come along with having your PE as we work our way through the presentation. Let's talk about why licensure matters. To a lot of people, maybe it's more of a personal objective or achievement, but it is it gives you the legal authority to sign and seal. So maybe you're, later on in your career, you decide to maybe become a principal owner or maybe become a consultant. At least if you have your PE, you won't have to have others review and sign off on your work. So that's a huge benefit there. But also it shows a commitment to professionalism. And this is the case with like PMP certification or just about any other certification to licensure. You've shown others that you have the commitment to see it through, right? But also you let people know that you're experts in that area as well. In some areas it's required. Maybe in consulting, construction, public works, so on and so forth. So the interesting thing, let me ask this. How far removed were you when you took the FE? Anybody care to share? And one of the reasons why I ask is the FE, obviously people can start taking it as their senior year in college, but it's a lot easier to take the FE either as a senior in college or a recent college grad. The reason being is a lot of those topics, as you know, are topics that, a college student has spent the last 3-4 years studying. You're also in that kind of a test-taking mode, and you also have the motivation. So let's look at some of the entry-level to mid-career. Competitive advantage. So let's say you take the FE and you're a graduating senior and you're applying for your first job. Let's say you both came from identical universities, so educationally, maybe you're on the same page as the other candidates, but you have your FE and someone else doesn't. So a potential employer might look at that and be like, wait a second here. This person already has their FE, can kind of hit the ground running. So maybe they'll select the candidate that has the FE. Some employers prefer their candidates or their new hires to have their FE already underneath their belt. And then also just give you faster access to responsibility. And let's move on here. So what about long-term growth? So, certain roles, maybe the PE is required or needed. As I mentioned earlier, to be able to sign off, stamp and seal, you do need your PE. So that's definitely a role or a task that having your PE can fulfill. Project manager. Lead engineer, a lot of times for government contract work, you're required to have a PE, but also a lot of times having your PE in a firm allows you a higher ceiling, I guess. meaning that, there's path to leadership in companies, maybe as a, senior leader, senior engineer, or as I mentioned kind of earlier, if you're looking to either go out on your own via the consulting role or opening up an engineering practice on your own. Sometimes a lot of people take pathways simply because of the salary benefit. So on the average, PEs, attaining your PE can be anywhere from a 10% to a 20% salary boost. And, we work a lot, I work with a lot of engineering firms at School of PE and, helping their employees either prepare for the FE or their PE. And what I mean by help and support is a lot of firms will either reimburse employees that are, taking their FE or their PE, or some of them will pay for their exam review course upfront. That way the employee doesn't have to kind of carry that burden of that price of, a review course or the exam or any other fees that kind of come associated with preparing for your FE and your PE. So from a company perspective, they do these programs as either a recruitment tool or a retention tool, right? A lot of people that are just either entering into the workforce as a soon-to-be FE or someone that's been in engineering for a while looking to get their PE, they find this attractive. They find, working for a company that sponsors this journey as being a huge added benefit on the employee side. And also recognize higher value. Not only, let's go back to kind of talk about some of the salary benefits. I know a lot of companies out there that, will give a bonus associated with passing their FE or their PE. All right, taking a look at the marketability and mobility slide. Anyone have any? Let's see. Okay, very nice. So it's a benefit to the company, Shishir, as well as yourself as well, correct? Oh, FE exam that's interesting. Which university did you attend where it was a requirement? Those seem to be dwindling. I work with quite a few universities where they highly suggest taking the FE, but a graduation requirement's interesting. And while we're waiting for that, anyone have any comments or thoughts on, let's see, must take. Okay, very nice. So at least they make you make that commitment of taking it before you graduate. That's very nice. I mean, again, does anyone disagree with taking the FE at the time of graduation or closely removed to it is more of a benefit or an advantage than taking the FE later on in life? Any thoughts on that? And again, feel free to either unmute yourself or throw it in the chat window. I appreciate all your guys' input. Let's see. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It's funny is I look at these exam specs almost every day and I'm like, how people tell you like some things are like riding a bike, right? That no matter how much time has passed, if you pick it up and you do it again, you're going to remember. But when you look at those exam specs, thermodynamics, statics, fluids, those aren't things that, if, years down the road go by, you're going to instantly remember. So it definitely makes it a lot easier to take when some of those subjects are still fresh in your mind. Just looking at the marketability and mobility, national, international recognition. We have one person joining us from Japan. So that kind of speaks to the international recognition. Makes a transition to consulting, even academia and management, a little bit easier. I would say more so on the consulting and management side as opposed to the academia. As I know a lot of professors that have been teaching engineering classes forever and have been in a university forever, I don't want to say value the PE as much, but to them, they're not going to go out and sign and seal stamp plans. But absolutely management and then also consulting. And as we talked about earlier this evening, required for public sector roles. Let's see, let's get to this other slide. Legal authority, PE grants, legal project ownership. As we mentioned here earlier, start an engineering business, but also there are some, I don't want to call them drawbacks, but there's some responsibility that comes with having your PE, right? Such as if you are the one signing off on plans and sealing, you are accountable, right, for the design and safety of that. So there is an accountability that comes with obtaining your PE as well. Now let's talk about some of the industry perception. Kind of touched on this earlier, trusted by employers and clients. They see you as being a subject matter expert or an expert in that area. Uh, Also, we kind of talked about the sign of professionalism, but also it gives you a competitive edge. And we use the idea of graduating from college, one person have their FE amongst candidates that do not. Maybe you're going to get the look over the ones that do not have it. One thing I kind of want to talk about, because this one is kind of interesting, at least to me, is myth versus reality. I talk with potential engineers quite a bit, and the ideal or idea of thought is that if you're not going to be a civil engineer, then it's really not needed. Well, in reality, it's valuable to any discipline. So, about 4 or 5 years ago at School of PE, we launched the PE Petroleum Exam Review course. And at that time, I was like, looking at the number of examinees, and the number of examinees for the petroleum exam are pretty small. And it's a very specialized area of. And I started asking, like, why is it such a small pool of examinees that sit for the petroleum, or even like, some of these other exams, control systems and things like that, is because a PE isn't required, like especially in like chemical field. A lot of PE or a lot of chemical engineers PE. And then years back, I saw a spike in the number of people that were actually sitting for the petroleum exam. So, I was talking to a few people, and I was like, well, why is there a sudden surge in the number of people taking the petroleum exam? And the response that was told to me, and it makes sense after they said it, is that petroleum industry had become so competitive that if you had a PE, it gave you an advantage over other candidates applying for some of the same work. So it kind of debunks the myth of like, hey, only civil engineers need it. But in reality, maybe is it as needed in civil? Maybe not, but is it valuable to have regardless of the engineering discipline? Absolutely. So I think I saw we had a couple of power people in here, and then I think the remainders are civil. Any other disciplines in here? Any mechanicals or anything like that? And then myth, not worth the effort. And actually, the reality is, it does pay off in the long term, right? So maybe you might not see, especially let's talk about the FE. So in order to take the PE, one must, pass the FE, but then you also must accumulate typically 4 years of work experience before you can sit for the PE. Although there are some states that now allow you to take the PE and then accumulate those years of work experience, and then you'll get your PE after your name after that. So if you think about it, let's say you're in those states where you pass the FE and you're not able to sit for the PE until you accumulate the 4 years of work experience. So if you're putting in the time and the effort to pass the FE, you're like thinking, okay, well, it's going to take me another 4 or 5 years after this to be able to sit for my PE. So maybe you don't see the payoff short term. But if you look at it long term, the FE is step one, right? It is what gets you started on your journey to engineering. And then another myth is only top students pass. Reality is preparation is key, and that's to anything, any exam for any licensing or credential, anything like that. It is about the preparation, right? Let me ask this: how many hours on average did you put in for preparing for the FE? And then all right, okay, very nice. Thank you for sharing. And about how many months did you have, or not say have, like how many months did you give yourself to prepare for the FE? Okay, it's 3 months. That's about average. Very nice. Yeah, it's hard to juggle that. So sometimes if you do take it your senior year in college, you're not having to juggle life along with school and preparing for the FE. But yeah, typically most students I talk to is about 3 to 4 month window for preparation for both the FE, and then another 3 and 4 months for preparation for their PE. Does it differ based on the individual? Absolutely, right? Education plus work experience. But yeah, preparation is definitely key. Did anyone take a course for preparing for their FE? Did you study on their own? And if so, what worked for you? Well, I'm waiting for some people to chime in here. I do want to kind of go back to what I talked about at the very beginning, like, you know, if you don't have FE and PE already in your career path or your vision, then maybe it's not something that you are considering at that time, and maybe you decide to pick it up later on. Um, but there's a lot of engineers out there, and only about 10% of those are actually licensed PE. So it is a pretty, elite group of people that have pursued their PE. Engineering is a very wide industry, but definitely having your PE will kind of help set you apart from the rest of the pack. Any other comments or questions or any other topics kind of on this path that anyone wants to discuss here? I know we're almost up against time. And again, I want to appreciate everyone coming out here on a Tuesday night. That's my email address. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, or if you just want to chat about exam strategies or tips for preparing for either the FE or the PE. Again, I appreciate you guys coming out tonight. If I'll hang around here and answer any questions or respond to any comments here, but if not, you're more than welcome to call it a night. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. And again, thanks for coming out here on a Tuesday night.